amongst yourselves around. So I'm asking you to be intentional, because you can talk about whether you liked the video or you agreed with it or whatever. I want you to really look at, what does this have to do with fidelity and measuring impact? And see what you can come up with. See what you can map onto it. So what did y'all come up with? Why do you think, what does this video have to do with fidelity and measuring impact?
I was saying to remind you where you come from. Don't forget, because you can always revert back to where you was. So it's always good to have that hand to help the next person.
Absolutely. Who else? Elaine? Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see everybody, and I saw Elaine's up.
You know what? Janet had her hand raised before me.
Oh, okay.
Janet, you go ahead.
I can't find the buttons at the bottom. I'm so sorry. But yeah, in our group, Shanna was talking about the how in the beginning of her journey, how she felt so alone because people hadn't been through her experience, or she was afraid of judgment and stuff that they found out. And so like her goal is to always make people feel comfortable, which is that fidelity to self. It doesn't matter what position we hold or where we are, but to bring, I think that Shireen called it her true north in some of her things that she's talked about. And then the measuring of the impact is that people are relatable to us. We're relatable to the people that we're with, because we're authentic and we're coming from that portion that has that position of having been there, done that, and that it's okay. There's a way out, and that you didn't lose your self-worth because of what happened to you. And so I thought that was really, really cool, and really thank my team for sharing. We didn't get to finish because you kept us away too far.
There's never enough time when we get started to really share.
I tell you.
Thank you. Elaine?
For our group, we talked about some of the things and I'm sorry, I don't know why I had a brain freeze there. We talked about some of the things and the individual things he discussed, and how they were impactful for us. I don't know that we ever came up with a clear reason why the video has to do with fidelity and measuring impact. But on the individual things, I think a few of them were really striking to me. And one was the very first one, the free bagel thing. And it was with that I realized I'm not the free bagel. I'm the one that doesn't want to wait in a line. And to see it like that, we kind of talked about that a little bit, like, how that line will make us go out of our way to be out of that line. So that's certainly something I want to consider more for myself, but also the people taking accountability for their actions. I mean, on the world stage, we see that happening not so much. It's really frustrating, but I feel like in this type of work that people have more integrity and stuff, this particular movement. So I tend to always just believe people. And I've actually had that bite me in the butt, and where people aren't taking accountability. And next thing you know, someone has done something not so nice to you or the organization because of their own personal reasons. And it's kind of shocking to me when that does happen. And like, what are you even doing here? You know, yeah, so just want to talk about those things. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Elaine. I do want to point out that it may not have looked like you were talking about fidelity, but a lot of what you said is exactly why we have this video. And that's the idea that for peer support, we're different. Peer support is the mutuality, is being held to a higher standard of our interactions with other people. So in that sense, you definitely were talking about how this had to do with fidelity and how we go about doing the work we do. So great, thank you. Melissa?
Yeah, I just brought up that for as leaders, we need to always remember that the fidelity and the impact are for the organization as opposed to our own personal success. And so it doesn't matter what our position is, the perks are nice, but we have to remember that it's not us doing the work. So we need to remember that it's everybody together.
Absolutely. And so we're going to run into some of these things as we go forward. Elaine? Okay. So, great. I really appreciate the thought processes that y'all have shared. Is there anybody else who wanted to share what may have come up, or the idea of we didn't come up with anything, we couldn't see how it was I mean, this is really y'all having to be creative and finding those connections. So you may not have, but you may have seen something else. Anybody else want to share? Okay, we're going to move on. So these are some of the things that we already looked at in terms of, you know, whose fidelity are we talking about? And we're going to kind of build on this idea. And there's, I'm going to tie it back to some of the things that are said in the video. The idea, and this I think speaks a little bit to what Melissa was saying, the idea that we collapse our purpose with our job. What happens when we over-identify with our job? And this is, so I want y'all to look at this whole conversation through the lens of you are now leaders of organizations that identify themselves as peer-run organizations. As leaders, we run the risk of over-identifying ourselves with our organization. And this is something, I mean, like, I am synonymous with prosumers. We absolutely have the propensity of over-identifying, especially because we have fought to be where we are. We identify as people in recovery. And for some of us, even as a badge of honor. And our being people in recovery becomes collapsed with where we work and what we do. So beginning to get that when we over-identify, one is we begin to get very attached to our organization and what we do, because it is, we see it as an actual personal threat. If somebody says something about our organization, or that it might need improvement, or that we may not be doing it right, because it is personal. It is a threat to our identity, because we identify as the organization, especially as leaders in the organization. We have a vested interest in attachment. Can y'all see what I'm saying there?
Clear.
Thank you, Arsa. Yes, and I saw the heads nodding. Because we begin to collapse that. So when somebody comes along and says, you're not meeting standards, it's not only, oh shoot, I didn't hit the mark. It's, oh, shoot, I didn't hit the mark and they're going to take it away from me. And who am I going to be otherwise? So we become very, very vulnerable and at risk of compromising our mission, compromising our fidelity, compromising what we say we're here to do, because we feel personally threatened. When somebody says it's time to be evaluated up against some standards to see if you meet fidelity. And so the idea of there is a standard out there, there is something out there that we need to align ourselves with, that we need to true ourselves up to say we are peer-run organizations, sometimes occurs as a threat. And it is a cautionary tale to look at, we're talking about the organization, not us personally. It doesn't mean we do or do not measure up. It means that the organization has room for growth. So if we begin to interact with the idea of fidelity, not in terms of am I being graded, but in terms of I'm actually getting feedback on am I meeting the mark I say I want to meet? Because I want to have the impact I say I want to have. When people come and say, I want what y'all are offering, which is a whole different approach to standards, evaluation, and fidelity. And it takes intentional, conscious effort to keep that in mind, that I'm now getting feedback on am I meeting my mark, and I'm getting support in bettering and bettering even those areas in which I am doing amazingly well, because I'm out to make a difference for people. I'm walking with them on their recovery journey. And what amazing is it to have somebody reflect back to me where I may be missing that puddle that I keep stepping in, so I may not be guiding people around it. It is an opportunity for growth, self-reflection, and everything that we say peer support is about. Being open-minded, growth, having that growth mindset. It's having partners, you know, that idea of turning to each other to support each other in developing a particular level of excellence. Can y'all hear the distinction I'm making? And how we can approach it as, am I making the grade, at which point I'm threatened? Or am I being supported and challenged in being the very best I can be? And not me as an individual and an identity, but me as steering an organization. It's the organization that can be the very best it can be. So that's when we're looking at fidelity, a particular way of approaching it is, this is the finish line, and I'm wanting to get to it well. Not that you ever arrive, it keeps moving, by the way, just like recovery is a journey, right? But this, you know, is like, I'm going to be the very best rappeller and the very best runner and the very best hiker and on this journey, because I'm going to learn those skills. What are we focused on? And sometimes we're focused on expediency, find the easiest, fastest way, and don't stop to see what is the impact of that. So I put a comment here. Fidelity to peer support models such as recovery community organizations and peer-operated service programs, which we're now saying peer instead of consumer, are based on evidence-based practices identified by people with lived experience. If you say you are a peer run program, you imply fidelity to peer values, ethics, and standards. Is that what you want? Or is that what your eye is on? Or are you focusing on how hard it is to do that, and how inconvenient it is to do that, and how that can limit funding opportunities? It can limit growth opportunities. What do you have your eye on? And it's not about being good, bad, or indifferent. It's who do you say you are? If you say you're an elephant, then it means that you're going to have a trunk, you're going to have thick legs, you're going to have a skinny tail, and you're going to have a very big body. It doesn't mean that if you don't say you're an elephant and you look like a zebra, that there's anything wrong with it. But if we say we're a peer-run organization, then we need to, walk like a duck, look like a duck, smell like a duck. We say this is what we are. That is what it is that we true ourselves up to. Is that really what we want? And these are some introspective conversations for you to have with yourself, your staff, to look at what are your practices. What are you truing yourself up to? Who do you say you are? Because you may be an amazing zebra calling yourself an elephant, which can be a little challenging when you're running your organization. Sometimes you just have to say, okay, I don't want to be an elephant because I'm really good at being a zebra. So continue looking at what is your focus? What is it you want? Because when we lose sight of what we want, all we see are obstacles. Or if we haven't defined what we want, we're putting our energy in things that isn't what we say, who we say we are. Any questions about that before I border on beating a dead horse? What thoughts come up? What do y'all hear in that?
I hear integrity. Practicing
like that word.
integrity. And yeah. And being true to yourself, and I think that's where it has to start, being honest with yourself about, what you're capable of. Where are you at? Accepting, accepting the organization, or what, accepting who you are and where you are, and not operating out of fear or whatever, walking in your purpose. And just that, a lot of times with me, I just want to be the best that I can be. So I'm always taking these trainings. I'm always reading, I just want to be better, and have the confidence, that I can provide the services that I say I want to provide, and not just, be in like all over the place, And so I have to be true to myself, though, in certain situations. Like you said, am I a zebra? Am I elk? What is it? And a lot of times I may be discovering that as I go along, but when I come up against it and see that, okay, well, maybe I've bitten off more than I can chew, or maybe this is not my lane. I have to be able to be honest with myself and accept that fact, my truth, and not have it based on kind of like, what I can get out of this, because if I'm going after something with the hopes of just looking at what I'm going to get, I'm already doing it wrong, because it's about what can I give, being of service, because being a peer, being in this role, it to me is such a blessing. And to me, I get emotional when I think about it, because it's like me when I was in recovery. beginning to get in, before I even made it to recovery, I didn't have the type of support. You know, I'm not saying I would have did anything different. I don't even know if I would been in the mind frame to do anything different. But we can raise the bar for others. You know, like you are in recovery when you say you're in recovery, but I can at least plant these seeds, and I can support whatever choice and decision you make. You know, so to me, to have that, to me, is just awesome. So I know where I'm coming from, you know, in life. I know I have an idea. I don't quite know exactly where I'm headed, but I'm trusting the process, you know. But I just want to be prepared for it without getting ahead of myself, you know. And so I hear you talking about practicing integrity, being true to myself, you know.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Regina. Janet?
Yeah. So, and I agree with everything Regina said, but the thought that occurred to me is the fidelity to peer values, ethics, and standards. I think we kind of know what those are, maybe. But I was impressed when Shireen was able to name them off 1, 2, 3, and you do the same thing. You go, our ethical standard number, 7 says this, and I don't know them that well. And I'm thinking, and I've been in trainings where people have no idea what our ethics are, what the standards are, and I think this actually is a call to action for us to really be able to be like Anna and Shireen, and being able to state these standards and these excuse me, values and ethics, like, our number 2 ethic is this, and this is, as because I'm speaking for myself. I don't know them that well. I have a sense of what they are. I know what some of them are, but I don't have them all memorized. I don't have them at my fingertips to be able to ensure that what I'm doing is what fits into all of that. Does that make sense? Okay.
Definitely. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you.
So it is a call to action. Yeah. Anybody else? And Shireen put in the chat, it's the difference. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Shireen.
Yeah, I was just going to say it out loud that it's what you just said, Janet, is when people say, I don't know how you are able to just cite those things. And I will say, because when you start actually using them and applying them in really very authentic ways, it's no longer about memorizing, because it's not a head issue. It's about living the values. And if we live the values, we can never walk away. The whole thing about you can't unsee things. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you learn them and you start living them, when you are not living them, it becomes painful. You can tell, like, when your language, when your actions, when your behavior, how you are led, how you lead are out of alignment with the values that we have agreed to be a part of every single day. And so your point about you can rattle them off, it's where we get to once we live this every day. We lead through these.
Absolutely. And, again, it's how we relate to these processes and to this, the standards, if you would, the values, the ethics, and the standards. We can look at them as things that are a pain because we have to live up to them, or we can actually look at them as the support and tools that they are when we are feeling challenged. When we're stuck or we're feeling challenged, especially as a leader leading the organization may be going through something that is beyond what they've ever gone through before, and dealing with stuff that hadn't come up before. And it's like, okay, how do we navigate these waters? How do we how do we address this? Because if we leave it to our usual automatic human response, it's most likely going to be a reaction. For some of us, we have some old habitual ways of thinking that when stressed show up, and we may start leading from those. That's called being human. But when we say we hold ourselves to peerness, to that idea of respect of others, of supporting them in their journey, of all of what we're held to, you know, confidentiality, self-determination, what they want, what they need, how to advocate for them when they're facing relationships where there's huge power differentials. All of that, you know, we're there to advocate with providers. That's our ethical standard number 7. So there's these ethical standards, right, that we have to follow. Sometimes when we're stuck, just reading through ethics or the standards of our professions can get us unstuck. It's like, oh, that just told me what I could do, because this is who I am, and that's what I would do in this situation. I realign myself with who I say I am. I realign my organization with who my organization says it is in light of its mission statement and our standards, our values, and our code of ethics. And so if we begin to see these as actual tools that can help us make sure that we are maintaining integrity. Integrity is peace of mind and power. Because when we're maintaining integrity, whether people like what we do or not, they know that if we say we're going to do it and we say this is who we are, that's what we're going to do, and that's how we're going to treat other people. And it's not about whether they like it or not. We are a known quantity, and by definition, we will be predictable in how people are going to be treated, how people are going to be respected, how people are going to be seen. So it does engender respect. So what our focus is and what we're doing to keep that in place matters. Now, if all we're seeing is barriers to us achieving what we want, using these as tools to reignite and refocus our vision on what we want, or even redefine what we want. It may mean that we go through some strategic planning and actually change our mission statement to where it better aligns with who we say we are, so that I can focus on what I want and not all the barriers. Because as peer run programs, there are some barriers, right? So sometimes just changing your point of view can give you a whole new energy boost. All right, so following with this idea of where's the focus, why does fidelity matter? What are some reasons for wanting fidelity to peer support models? I've gone over some of it, but what do y'all come up with? What other ideas do you have about why it matters to have fidelity to peer support models? Yes, Melissa.
If it doesn't matter to us, it's not going to matter to others that we work with. And so our professionalism or our value is not going to be seen.
Absolutely. Thank you. Reggie.
Yeah, we want to have some consistency in the way that the peer support is delivered to people. And we want to make sure that, you know, there's certain standards that are being met by peer support specialists. So.
Absolutely. Thank you. Elaine.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was off video. Another one that might not seem so important. I don't know, but I'm going to say it is to be good stewards of our funding.
Yes. And I'm going to take that a step further, if I may, Elaine. Be good stewards of our funding and ensure our funding matches our mission statement, values, ethics, and standards. Yeah, that there's alignment there. Absolutely. Who else? So, is it important in achieving outcomes for people walking recovery journeys? Yes, Javi.
Yeah, I was just going to add, it's what makes us different, right? And so my example is early on, especially in the drug courts, in the DWI drug courts, there was always this push, right? Your role is what? We're not really sure. Yeah, whenever the peer or the participant gets to your organization or your office and you meet with them, they leave, you call us to let us know that you met with them. And no, the fidelity of the model is, what we shared, it's on the contract, it's in our memorandum of understanding. And I can't tell you how many times in 2014 to 2016, how many different times they try to word it to make it seem like it's okay to just let us know whenever. And it was like, and it just became this thing, but it was in the purpose and in the goal for not only the organization, but for ethical purposes, for ethical standards, and then for the movement, right? As what we were talking about at the very beginning of our conversation. We're in it for the movement, not to move backwards, but to move forward. And standing our ground led us to having more funding opportunities. And then, years after, it was like, oh, now we understand what your role is. After we've been saying it, year after year, we need peer support. So it flip-flopped. And so it was because of the fidelity that we held personally, organizationally, and systematically, I think is what helped us has helped us move forward in a lot of these different areas.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for saying that, Javi, because we are pulled to be what others want us to be and not who we say we are. And so this second question is, if we are pulled to be like everybody else, are we going to show the results of peer support? That's actually a question. Do y'all think if we're matching what they think we need to be doing, are we going to have the impact and outcome of peer support? Absolutely. Melissa put in, no, we're not. So fidelity isn't just to say, I met the measure. Yes, Janet.
It reminds me of early on in peer support. They would hire somebody that either they give them a job that wasn't peer support, but they were a peer. So they put them in as a receptionist, or they put them in as whatever. And then they go, but peer support doesn't work. We got peers and nothing's changed around here. But that's because they weren't being able to do peer support. They were giving them all these other jobs, but they weren't peer support. And it's really frustrating, because these people that came in and said, they have all these peers working here, but nothing's changed and it's all the same. But they weren't given a chance to do peer support. They were put, and that's the case today still. You know, we have peers out there that are doing a lot of things, and they're doing skills training, and they're transporting people, and they're doing all these other things, but they're not being able to do peer support. And they're going, oh, we really like our peers, you know, they do all that other stuff that, you know, nobody else wants to do. But they don't really make a difference in people's lives because we don't get a chance to do that because that is not what's being asked for. Anyway, I could go on and on about this, but it frustrates me. But when we're allowed to do peer support, we have an impact that no other can have. I tell you, I was in a hospital for 2 years, 50 hospitalizations after that, in the system forever and ever. And it was a peer, someone who stepped out of her role as a clinician and did just all she did was validate me. And it was the first time I got validated. It was the first time I connected with somebody. That started my journey. And had she not done that, I'd still be probably hiding in my house. So again, we get great outcomes. The system, they can keep people on a level field or whatever, but people don't have the lives that they love. Anyway, I'm talking a lot. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Janet, and thank you for your passion. So, are you getting the results that you want for your organization? And this is a follow-up in terms of, is it important in achieving outcomes for people walking recovery journeys in terms of us having fidelity? So how often do we stop to take stock of what we are accomplishing in life? And this is where the idea of evaluating our programs for impact, measuring our programs for impact comes into play. One of the things that I would assert about all of your recovery journeys is that whatever you're struggling with in life, in the moment, feels like you haven't made any progress, or the progress you've made is limited. And it's only when you take a step back and look at and see, where were you a year ago? Where were you 5 years ago? Where were you 10 years ago? That you begin to realize, yeah, I'm still dealing with stuff today, but holy cow, look how far I've come. So if we're not doing that for our organizations, if we're not taking a step back and working with the people we have the honor of walking side by side with to say, what do y'all see? How are we doing? What is the result? What are you seeing in your life out of coming here? Then we're not taking the time, one, to acknowledge who we are, to acknowledge how far we've come, to acknowledge for ourselves as an organization, we make a difference. Because we were here, people got their life. Because we are here, people who have a calling to use their lived experience to make a difference for somebody else have a place where they can do it in fidelity, where co-optation is minimal. If we're not looking to see, are we doing what we said we were going to do, then one, we're missing out on our opportunity to keep our motivation and our passion. So at the very beginning of this, and it wasn't very clear because of the challenges we were having with the video, there is a, he's basically talking about our approach to work, right? And part of, and I thought I had written it down exactly what he said, and I may not have it right here, but basically what he's saying is if what you're doing isn't pulling your forward, we call that stress. If what you're doing day in and day out is what you love and what matters to you, that's called passion. So another way to look at your leadership and then the impact of your leadership on your organization and your impact of your organization in terms of the lives of people is to look and see, have you crossed that line between passion to stress? And if so, is it time to take a step back and reevaluate? Have we allowed mission creep? Have we allowed things to happen, or even in our own level of commitment that has kept us from being cognizant and vigilant about our own recovery journey? Because that's going to impact our organization. That's going to impact the people that we have the ability and the great honor to walk beside. So these are some of the questions that get answered when we're looking at that measuring piece. Does that make sense? So keeping our eye on what we want and using these opportunities to recalibrate. You know, you can think of the work you do, the organizations you run as well-oiled machines, but you still got to change the oil every now and then. You got to rotate the tires, and sometimes you even need to get new tires, right? You need an all-terrain vehicle this time around because you branched into whole new areas where people are really benefiting from having somebody walk beside them. So when we have the opportunity to look back and say, what's going to work now? What do we need now? Then we keep ourselves passionate. And it helps with secondary traumatic stress. It helps with burnout. It helps with all those things that we run the risk of, especially when we are wearing 15 hats at our organization. So now, the whole idea of sometimes we're the problem. When are we the problem? What did y'all hear in that particular story? People were dying. Somebody gave them an idea of why it might be. Those who had the decision-making power said, no, it can't be that, and continued doing what they were doing for 30 years. Janet?
Well, sometimes we're the problem because we lose sight of things and we don't take into account, because I mean, we really don't usually try to see ourselves in that position that we're the problem, but sometimes we are. This goes to, I was talking with a doctor, and he was a psychiatrist, and he was talking about NAMI parents that would bring their kids in. And he said, a lot of times I tell the NAMI parents, the problem with your child is you. And I thought, you know, that's probably pretty brave of you, because they're probably not going to bring their kid back to you. But, you know, I see it, you know, sometimes when I was raising my grandson, you know, he'd get in trouble at school and start acting out. And I'd realize I had not been paying attention to him. I hadn't been there for him. The problem was me. He was the side effect of what my problem was, right? And I changed my behavior, and guess what? He got better at school. So yeah, and I think those are harder to see, but a lot of times we are the problem because we think a certain way, and we think that our way is the way to go. I don't know. That's at least my thought. I could be all wrong, but
Thank you for
maybe
sharing.
still the problem.
Thank you for sharing, Jenna. I appreciate it. Reggie,
Sure.
did you have something? I saw you go off mute.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. I mean, sometimes, I mean, we get so caught up in running organizations that we can kind of lose sight of, why we got into this work in the first place. And that's the time, I mean, when you always supposed to check in with the community, but the people that's closest to the problem is generally closer to the solution, as we like to say, right? So, we have to keep a lot of communication open with the people that we're working with and the communities that we work in, because things change out there. And if we're working off the same old dynamics and the same old paradigms that we've been working off, that somebody taught us, that somebody taught them, well, it's great that we know how to do all of those things, but is it really helping the people that we serving? So yeah, keeping in mind that, we have to constantly keep our finger on the pulse of the communities that we in is something that we really got to keep, in front of us, because it's easy to, we know best.
Yes.
I know they want to do that, but this is what we're going to do.
Exactly.
This is what we're
Exactly.
gonna do. Yeah.
Thank you, Reggie. I appreciate that. So Angelina, is it Angelina or Angelina? Which do you prefer?
Whichever you prefer.
Okay.
I don't mind being called either. But I was gonna say, sometimes I think like we're the problem because, just like in the video, right? Like they told him and they suggested it, and then like nothing changed. And so I think sometimes when we get like constructive criticism, we don't take action on that. And so when we don't take action, nothing changes. But then, maybe later on down the line, oh, I remember that one person told me this, maybe let me change it. And then all of a sudden things start to change. So sometimes that's how where the problem is, just by not listening the first time and, having to kind of like experience the same thing over and over and over again, until we end up, deciding to change it or make something different. That's what I was going to say.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. One of the challenges is, so if you look at the standards under CAPRAS for that Faces and Voices for Recovery has put out, and the standards that we're developing right now for peer operated service programs, a lot of those standards center around the input of the people who, come and interact with us and share their recovery journeys with us. And how many times do we get so busy running the organization that we don't take the time to find out what their thoughts are or what they need or what they would want? And they're no longer feeling like they have a legitimate say in how their and how what we're doing is being developed, and we're doing it for their lives. Right? So one of the things where we run the risk of being blind, and where our standards can be very important to us, is helping us make sure that we're keeping our eye on what we're here for while we're doing the business of running an organization. Does that make sense? So just beginning to look at where we are the problem may actually look a lot, and I'm talking to myself here, okay? These are some of the growth areas that I have. Where we may be the problem is where we are actually gaining success as good managers, but start neglecting what it is we're here for. So that's one of the things to look at as we grow in our leadership, and as we begin to look at how we can use fidelity and measuring our impact as ways of truing ourselves up to who we say we are as an organization. So, what is the impact when we don't do that? I just gave you some ideas, but what other things do you see that can be the impact when we are not paying attention to fidelity to a model, or taking the time to look and see how are we doing, and are we achieving what we said we were going to?
Can you say that again, Anna?
What is the impact of not knowing that sometimes we're the problem? The impact in the video was for 30 years, women kept dying, which
Right.
I apologize for not giving y'all a warning that could be a little hooking. It could be a hook for some of us because of the injustice of it and the obvious paternalistic.
I had never heard that before. I had heard about people not washing their hands and people in surgeries and stuff dying, but I had never heard about the women giving childbirth, which.
So there was an impact of not knowing there, right? So what's the impact for us and our organizations for not knowing? Yes, Angelina. Oh, I'm sorry, Janet. Were you?
Well, I was going to say, the impact of not knowing is we don't know, because we don't know what we don't know. I mean, in the case that showed, it was like somebody came to them and said, this would make a difference. But people didn't believe them, so they kept doing it that way until 30 years later.
Okay, I got that. Thank you.
Mhm.
I saw Angelina, yes.
Okay.
And then Elaine.
So Arza wrote in the chat something about like what I was gonna say. So we can like potentially stop people from like growing or living more healthy lives because they get like, maybe they get like a trigger, or maybe like they end up like not coming back. So then that's now a resource that they're not going to utilize because of whatever it is that you're doing that someone already told you and you know gave you that constructive criticism, but yet you continue to just do it the way that you want to do it. So I think that's how it could damage the community.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Angelina. And yes, it can limit possibilities for growth. And I'm going to circle back to Melissa's comment as well, but I want to hear what Elaine has.
Well, actually, looking at Melissa's comment, I see I was going to say some of that, and pretty much what I wanted to say, like about the movement as a whole, like especially when so many others don't know what we do, and if we're not sticking with something, that gets even more cloudy or chaotic or whatever. And then people don't realize the value of the movement itself if we don't stick to it. I mean, if we don't know that we're the problem too, like if something is a problem.
Absolutely.
And I would like to, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I would like to say we lose sight and focus on our purpose, you know? And so the services that we initially started out to provide, it's not being received to the people that we serve, to the movement or any of that, you know. So I you know, and I think that a lot of times that can impact the impact I think that it'll have is that it'll disappear. I mean, if so many organizations take that stance of not, you know, looking at that, and then, you know, that's all.
Absolutely. And it really is. So we have so many aspects of our work that seem to be contradictory but are not. And part of it is the people who we have the opportunity to walk with don't need us. They've managed to make it alive and be where they are just fine without us. They want it when they are ready to want a different life. we're a support for that. They don't need us. They can use us. So in that sense, and yet the other side of that is peer support makes a difference that nothing else can in so many ways. And when we are not being responsible to do what we say we were going to do, and Shireen put it very, very clear, people get harmed, die, or confined. When we lose sight of why we're here, people have to go elsewhere or may never really get that they can have amazing lives and how to achieve it. So there is a gravitas about that. I don't want it to be heavy and significant, but we're talking about people and people's lives here. And we sometimes lose track of that until something happens that throws it in our face. So it's important for us to remember it's not about running a perfect or great organization. It's about serving people in a way that makes a difference. Do y'all hear the distinction in that?
Yeah, I like that.
Awesome. All right. So here's where sometimes we may be the problem. And as leaders, we may get attached to being the best, biggest, perfect organization and not realize that we're working with people whose lives have not worked the way they wanted them to. And we have the opportunity to walk with them to find the place where it can. And that is messy business. And it may not look like the biggest, best, and most perfect, but it may definitely yield the results. So these are some of the things to keep in mind as we grow as leaders. And so what are the benefits of measuring the impact? It's because now we know whether we're doing it or not, as opposed to guessing, right? Can we do it alone? There's this idea that we're out to make an impact, and that mountain has to be climbed, and it may be fast, it may be slow, it takes patience, it takes hard work. What we do is not for the faint of heart. It isn't. We dare to care about people who can do whatever they want to do. And we can't tell them how to do it or where to do it. We just help them realize they want to do it and then equip them to do it. So that can lead to some heartbreak. Janet, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just thinking that the ethical standard of self-determination, that we're supposed to sit and listen, and they give us instructions of where they want to go, what they want to do. And that it broke my heart when you said what Shireen said. I teared up because people do get hurt.
Yes.
And when we're trying to direct people's lives or whatever, because it's faster, it's easier. Let's be honest, it is easier to tell somebody what to do than to sit with them for 3 or 4 days so they figure it out what they want to do or what need to do. But that's our job, is to sit there and listen and have them tell us how we can support them in having the life they love. Sorry.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Janet. I agree completely. I think this is just my opinion and how I feel as a peer support specialist. I feel like we really do have to have the most patience out of everyone that person interacts with. And I think a lot of times that's the very reason why people are so comfortable coming to us about things that they won't go to someone else about. But I think that, yes, we do have to have like extreme patience.
Well, and we've got to outlast people who are masters at trying to convince people they're not worth anything. Right? We've been there. We know what it is to feel that sense of despair and worthlessness. And we can't hear that that may not be true.
Right. And also, just to add on to that, so also people are a lot of times they're masters at getting people to not care anymore.
Yep.
And so they know which things to say, they know how to, try to get on your nerves, or like, I've been cussed out a lot of times, but
I'm going to prove I'm not lovable.
Yeah, right. So when you're new into recovery, at least when I was new into recovery, I really felt like worthless. Like nobody is going to care. Nobody is going to help me. And if the harder I make it, then they're just going to give up because I'm not worth that much. And so a lot of times I feel like people, when they come to us, that's their mentality. That's what they're thinking. Like, oh, I'm just going to do everything that I can do to upset this person so that they won't want to work with me anymore. And then it'll just be another person that gave up on me, and they can fit in right with everyone else that gave up on me. So, yeah.
Absolutely, Angelina. Thank you.
Boy, I still identify with that.
Elaine?
Yeah, what Angelina was saying just kind of reminded me of something, actually, and like with funders, actually. Some are wanting more immediate sort of results and stuff, or these more tangible things. And and when you were saying it, Angelina, I could just feel it and hear it, and I was picturing it with different peers. Like, it absolutely takes time. Oh man, sometimes it's been months before I've gotten like someone somewhere really solid in a trust way. Like, sure, we've maybe gotten like the tangible things accomplished and stuff, but those real trust relationships do not happen that fast. And I wish we were better able to convey that to some of the people wanting to see these immediate results, and even down on my level of just being in the field, like without knowing anything else that leadership or management is doing. I can feel when those things come, because then it's like, oh, well, we need this, so we need it now. And then I start to my stuff gets thrown off, like next thing, like I'm cutting something short to get to the next thing, and it just starts to get messy, actually. And yeah,
Absolutely.
so I really love that Angelina said that this does take time,
It takes time, it takes commitment, and like Melissa said, that is why this is peer support. And that's how peer support is different from everybody else. Yes, Shireen. Shireen, we can't hear you. Oh.
Sorry. Yeah, I know. Sorry with this phone, my computer stuff. Sorry. Which also requires us, when we're talking about measurements, we're talking about contracts, and we're talking about receiving funding, to translate our values into the measurements and resist measurements that are inconsistent with our values. So for example, if a funder then wants to measure time as a measure of success, the amount of time you spend with somebody, authorizing all the time that you do spend with somebody, or the length of time they're receiving peer support, that's an example of something that is likely very incompatible with peer support. That is very relationship-based, that is about earned trust, that we know in any relationship there are setbacks and challenges and struggles and all of those sort of things. So when we're looking at what we are measuring, that may not be an accurate measure of what makes peer support effective. There are other measures, there are other fidelity items that we would want to measure and highlight, but we also want to translate that into the funding exchange. When we are being measured against a set of criteria that are incompatible with what peer support is, we are never going to be able to meet those standards. And we shouldn't, because they're not our standards, they're other people's standards.
Exactly. Thank you for that, Shireen. I really appreciate it. So in the interest of time, we're going to run through the next slides pretty quickly, but I do want to point out, we don't do this alone. And if we're not supporting each other as organizations and as leaders, we're doing damage to each other, because we get to see ourselves reflected in others and learn from each other. And if we're not there to support each other along the way, I tell you what, this is not for the faint of heart. Doing it alone will kill you. It will eat you up. So using each other to support each other becomes important. And finding the tools to develop the tools, using the tools, knowing that the lone wolf is going to have it a lot harder than the one who aligns with others and gets that support. And the kicker is, we are in this together, and we support each other in developing processes and resources to maintain fidelity. We may learn a trick of the trade that when we share it, we make all of us stronger. We rise and fall together, and we lose track of that. So that's one of the things for us to remember. You may be strong, you may be smart, and if you're alone, you're going to struggle. So there is power in our working together. And are we willing to be the last to speak? We talk a lot about, in peer support, about being great listeners. Okay, I don't know, it just changed. But are we actually willing to not be flapping our mouth or nodding our head or shaking our head? And I don't do that well. Y'all know I like talking. So really, are we interested in seeing the other worldview, the point of view of those around us? Because if we keep our trap shut, we're going to learn something. And we may actually change our minds about where we were going to go with something, because we listened and saw that there were some unintended consequences that we didn't consider. So part of that process is in measuring us. Are we willing to listen how other people see how we're doing, without defensiveness, without yeah buts or explanations or reasons, but absolutely being willing to hear what others see? Because it looks different when I'm in my head looking outside my eyes than it does from somebody else who are looking in towards me. And if I'm not willing to see that, then I am absolutely losing an opportunity for growth and development. So we need each other, and we need to be able to shut up. Not just listen well, but not voice an opinion, because it will cause people to alter what they're going to say. Be aware. And it helps to have that mirror to reflect back to us. The other thing is, are we the styrofoam cup? As leaders, we start playing in arenas where we have to dress up and look respectable. We may be in our Capitol buildings, we may be in areas of influence, we may be in the halls of businesses, seeking those contributions, seeking those endorsements, all of that. Be careful, don't forget where we came from. It is the position that gets to be in those places. It is not who we are. Who we are people walking a recovery journey, and we can find a pitfall at any corner. And sometimes it's tied to our own ego and identity. So I encourage you to keep the humility in the roles we play. It helps to follow those standards, those ethics, and those values. Stay grounded in the fidelity of who we say we are. That becomes important. We strive for fidelity to make a difference. We succeed and can show the impact. Now what? So we did it. Let's say we got there. We're meeting the fidelity to all of who we are. We're looking to see, are we measuring up? And guess what? We measure up. Now what? So this is where we're going to pick up on the next one. One is keep doing it. The other is, what are you going to do with that data? And how can you use that to even grow even more at a higher rate or to a bigger level to scale up? So I am sorry I went over a few minutes, but I wanted to, but those of you who are still here, what did you hear? Is there anything y'all want to say or have questions about in terms of this whole idea of us as leaders, fidelity, and measuring our impact? So, thoughts, comments, good jokes?
It's causing some good reflection.
Yeah, I've been
Thank you.
kind of like nailing myself with this one.
Well, I'm so grateful for you sharing this with us and doing this presentation, Anna. I really appreciate all the work that goes into this as well. Thank you all for being here and have a great day.